Has your child experienced misfortune due to shortcuts being made because there has been a lack of support within their education? Or maybe you are concerned that your child has gone for long lengths of time without the support that they need and recognise that there are implications to their education and their development. This video is for parents that are advocating for their children who have individual needs and differences such as ADHD or autism or any other conditions, and ensuring that their abilities, needs and challenges are recognised within their education and their development. I am going to talk about how complacency can lead to unpredictable experiences for a child, and also how parents can look out for the signs and ensure that this doesn't happen. I'm going to talk about how I advocated for my son whilst we were experiencing complacencies within his education, and how it allowed us to identify them earlier on so that it wouldn't make a devastating impact on his progress. So what does it mean to be complacent, and why do things become complacent? Complacent: showing smug and uncritical satisfaction with oneself or one's achievements. While I observed my son engaged within his education, I recognised that there are key behaviours that allow for complacency, and I'm going to discuss those later on in this video. So the reason for complacency is that it allows for people to feel that things are running like clockwork. So in the context of what we're talking about, this could look like ensuring that everybody is following the same hymn sheet and ensuring that things are going in logical order and things are done according to time, plan, schedule, etc. And for someone that has autism, time and structure is important, but sometimes it can be challenging to adapt to this, and it might require some flexibility. The other thing is having a disproportionate number of staff versus pupils. And another thing could be the pressure of expectations to follow things through in accordance to perhaps the local authority or to Ofsted. All this needs to be considered when ensuring that things run like clockwork. So as a parent, I have seen my child experience the consequences of unsafe predicaments happening because there is pressure for things to run like clockwork, where the expectation for my son is to stay focused, to be consistent, and to ensure that the information that he retains is applied in the same way to the majority. Despite having awareness of his condition of autism and ADHD, having that pressure to have everything running like clockwork did have implications on how he engaged within his education and felt inclusive along with his peers. Having the intention of everything running smoothly and feeling confident that you know that everything is what it should be is not a negative thing. However, but there are certain situations that come at a cost, and a few can be described as time versus risk and personal risk perception, which in turn leads to unwanted outcomes. Personal risk perception. This is thinking it's possible anyway, without thinking something misfortune might happen, just to save time or to create shortcuts. So in my experience, this is where this happens. So my son was engaging in his learning in a particular subject, and it became overwhelming due to sensory issues around sound. So a key worker, a coordinator, suggested that perhaps he would then go and sit in her office and stay there for the duration of that lesson. So every time that lesson came up, he would sit there. So we, meaning the school, myself, had the awareness that this was something temporary, because it was acknowledged that the sound was actually impacting his ability to retain information and feel comfortable within the classroom. And for myself, I felt that, okay, that may be a bit too much to ask. This can't be something long term, but it did go on for long term. Initially, the intention was to deal with the situation quickly to remove my son, but the intention wasn't to keep him there for a long period of time. But where the complacency trap happened was that it became apparent that it was inconvenient for my son to be there. There was no other option to have him placed anywhere else. And this had an impact on that key coordinator in her ability to do her work. And the impact for my son was that he was starting to feel bored and frustrated. He wasn't able to participate in that lesson just like his peers, and therefore he wasn't able to have that same experience as others. So that key worker had all the intentions to deal with the situation immediately, and her perception of that was that there will be no risk because this was something that could accommodate the situation. Time or effort versus risk. This is where the choice has been made to take a shortcut, where it's gone on for months on end and it becomes a habit where you don't remember or think about doing them. It happens by magic without thinking. In my experience, there was a time when it was very apparent that my son was not able to stay for the required lengths of time in a particular lesson. As my son is in receipt of an EHCP, there was an option to have an earlier meeting to address the situation, where other professionals can come together and look at the situation and provide the tools and support to allow my son to work with that situation effectively. However, that was not chosen because they felt that the time to do that and the effort required to have so many people together could actually benefit from just having a few conversations. It is helpful to have that continuous communication with the key teachers and perhaps the teacher about how things are going, like generally over the day. Perhaps that's in the form of a link book or something of those terms. But in this situation, it was more around the fact that it was a bigger issue and it would get worse. The complacency trap in this situation for my son was that because it had gone on for long lengths of time, that was not the solution to the situation. What happened was my son's behaviours began to increase, and over time his frustration with the situation didn't warrant conversations at the end of the day. It actually needed some action, and that had an impact on how he was perceived as well as the situation itself. Catch-ups were not a substitute for meetings, and they are two completely different things. But this was an example of how the impact of being complacent with the way things are done had an impact on how my son was responding in terms of his overall well-being. The complacency trap is that there was no point of reference to refer to or look back at to find or identify at what point things got to where they were, because having informal conversations don't allow for things to be recorded. So by having meetings, this would prevent these complacency traps from occurring and having a negative impact on my child's well-being. Allowing things to go on for too long without question doesn't lead to progress. And what I recognise when working with other parents, other areas where complacency happens may be where parents are coming in earlier to reduce the tension of the school because their child is in school without the support that they need and it's causing distress. Even becoming aware that a child is now working corridors because there's no available space, and finding that this was done in the interim but it seems to be happening for a long period of time, and in some cases a whole term. It is clear that complacent behaviours are not done with the intention to catch a child out. It's something that you're not aware of to start off with, but you're only aware of it when crisis happens. It's a slow spiral out of control. So why do I highlight this? The reason I highlight it is because this is where the challenge is for us parents. It's making sure that we highlight these concerns at an earlier stage and have the courage to be able to do that, because it can't be easy, but once you recognise how things can get to where they are, it is a lot easier to do it in the beginning and to do it at the start. It's really unsettling when people tell you that, oh, I don't see how it got to that point. And then you hear narratives such as, well, it doesn't happen here, so it must be something happening at home, or something along those lines. This brings weight to narratives, to situations where things get into a really sticky situation, such as safeguarding or perhaps exclusion, or even your child being labelled as a school refuser. So as empowered parents, it's really important to guide the process and redirect people to the knowledge that they need, or the information or the guidance that they need to be able to support your child through what they're currently experiencing. So if you're a parent and you're going through the education system and you're advocating for your child that has individual needs and differences, why not think of subscribing, or perhaps take a look at some of my other videos. I'm here to provide some content around our shared experiences, and I'd love to know what your comments are and if you've experienced anything that we've discussed today. For now, stay focused, stay empowered, and keep creating progress. Thank you for listening.